my name is Julie. I'm standing in my new, smaller apartment, the sunlight streaming through the empty windows. It's quiet, a silence that's a far cry from the chaos of my old life. I'm finally free, but the journey here has been a long and painful one. A few days ago, I received a call from Tom's mother, Helen. She told me that Tom had a complete breakdown when a second lawsuit arrived. It was then that he finally realized there were consequences to his actions. Hearing that, I felt a sense of closure. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met Tom in college. He was charming, full of life, and always the center of attention. I was drawn to his energy and charisma. We got married young, and for a while, it was good. We had a normal life, rent was paid on time, we had a couple of cars that worked most of the time, and our fridge was always stocked. I work in IT security. It's a job where I'm trained to spot risks before they turn into disasters. I'm a careful, methodical person, and I like to plan for the future. I make a decent living, not enough to buy a private jet, but stable enough to build a future with patience and hard work. Tom, on the other hand, worked part-time at a trendy coffee shop. He loved the atmosphere, the music, and the attention he got from the customers. He was the kind of guy who could walk into a room and make everyone smile. 2 years ago, Tom announced that he needed to find himself. He said it so casually, as if he was just changing his hairstyle. I'm burnt out, he told me, leaning back on our couch like he was giving a big speech. I need some space to figure out what I really want in life. I wasn't happy about it, but I supported him. That was my first big mistake. At first, his spending was small. He'd come home with new clothes, fancy coffee subscriptions, and the occasional expensive dinner. He'd carry those shopping bags like they were trophies and kiss me on the cheek as if he'd brought home the groceries. You look happy, I'd say. I am, he'd reply. Don't you want me to be happy? Of course, I did. So, I ignored the little warning signs in my head, telling myself it was just a phase. But then, things started to get out of control. Our joint account was draining faster than it should have. It wasn't just a few $100s, it was thousands. One night, as we were watching a reality show, I finally brought it up. Tom, we need to talk about money, I said. He didn't even look up from his phone. I'm seeing charges I don't recognize, I continued. He just scrolled through his phone, like my words were nothing more than background noise. I'm just treating myself a little, he said. You're so uptight about everything. I wasn't being uptight, I was worried. We were supposed to be saving for a house. That got his attention. He turned his head slowly, his eyes half-lidded with annoyance. We'll figure it out. You always do, he said. That phrase, you always do, became his answer to everything. When the bills piled up, I'd figure it out. When the car needed repairs, I'd figure it out. When he wanted a weekend trip, I'd figure it out. And I did, because I loved him and I didn't want to fight. About 8 months ago, the first credit card statement I didn't recognize arrived in the mail. It was an old-fashioned paper envelope with a bank logo in the corner. I thought it was junk mail, just pre-approval offers. But then more statements started coming from Capital One, Chase, American Express, and Discover. At first, I left them on the counter for Tom to deal with. He'd just sweep them into a drawer without even opening them, as if ignoring them would make the debt disappear. One afternoon, my curiosity got the better of me. I opened one of the statements. My stomach dropped when I saw the balance, $8,400. And the name on the statement was Tom's, not mine. I sat at the kitchen table, holding the paper in my hands, and thought, this can't be right. It must be a mistake or a scam. But the account number and the transactions looked very real: restaurants, clothing stores, weekend hotel deposits, and even a men's grooming salon I'd never heard of. When Tom came home, he was in a good mood. He tossed his keys in the bowl and said, "Hey, I found this amazing place for brunch tomorrow." I cut him off, holding up the statement. "What is this?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. He barely glanced at it. "Oh, I opened a few cards. We needed them for expenses," he said. "Expenses?" I repeated. "This is $8,000 on one card. How many do you have?" He shrugged like I was asking about the number of socks he owned. "I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. I stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" He exhaled, annoyed. "Because you get like this. You make everything a big deal." I tightened my grip on the paper. "You're building up a huge debt," I said. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and said, "I'm going to Dave's. I can't deal with your negativity right now." And he walked out. That was the moment something changed in me. It wasn't a big explosion of anger, it was a quiet, cold feeling, like a door closing inside my chest. That night, I did what I always do when something feels wrong. I gathered evidence. I pulled my credit report, expecting to see damage, unauthorized accounts, and inquiries. But my report was clean. My credit score hadn't changed. That should have made me feel better, but instead, it made my stomach turn. It meant that Tom had dug his own hole, and if everything came crashing down, it would be on him, not me. Over the next few months, more credit card statements arrived. Tom would just toss them aside and complain about the spam. I tried to tell him they were bills, but he wouldn't listen. "I'll deal with it later," he'd say, but he never did. I started to take matters into my own hands. I kept just enough money in the joint account to pay my share of the rent and utilities. The rest of my paycheck, I quietly moved to a separate account he didn't know about. I redirected my direct deposit like it was a top-secret mission. One Saturday, I came home to find Tom unboxing a pair of designer shoes with a price tag that made my head spin. "Tom, where's this money coming from?" I asked, my voice tight. He winked at me. "I have my ways. Don't worry, babe. You focus on your little office job. I'll handle the fun stuff." My little office job was the one paying for our rent, groceries, and all the other necessities that Tom took for granted. I also noticed that he was acting more secretive. His ex-girlfriend, Lily, started popping up in his phone notifications. He'd laugh and turn his phone away when I asked about it. "She just liked my post," he'd say, too quickly and too casually. It wasn't proof of cheating, but it was definitely proof of secrecy. By the 8th month, the stack of unopened credit card statements on our counter was like a monument to his denial. Tom still walked around the apartment like he was invincible, thinking I'd always be there to clean up his mess. Then, one day, I got a call from Tom at work. His voice was shaky and loud. "Julie, something's wrong. My card got declined. I tried all of them, and they're all declined. I'm at the grocery store checkout." I was sitting at my desk, looking at the threat logs on my monitors. I already knew what was happening. "Did you pay the bills?" I asked. There was a long pause on the line. "I thought you were paying them," he whispered. I stared at the wall behind my monitors. Why would I pay bills on cards I don't have access to? Those cards are in your name. They're your responsibility. He exhaled sharply. "But I don't know how to deal with credit card companies." I replied, "That's exactly why you shouldn't have opened 6 of them." He was shocked. 6? I only opened 4. I ticked off the names of the banks in my head: Capital One, Chase, Discover, American Express, Citi, and Bank of America. "I count 6 different statements that come here every month," I said. He was silent for a moment, then mumbled, "Oh, you forgot about a couple." And then he hung up on me. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different. The air was thick with tension. Tom was sitting on the floor with his laptop open, surrounded by papers. He looked up at me, his eyes red and glossy. "I've been on hold with the credit card company for 2 hours. They keep transferring me," he said hoarsely. I set my bag down slowly. Yeah, they do that, I replied. He tried to laugh, but it came out as a broken sound. I told them you'd call. I told them my wife manages the finances and she'd set up a payment plan, he blurted out. I stared at him. You told them I'd call? He flinched. I didn't know what else to say. They were asking questions and threatening me. I said truthfully, then you should answer their questions. His face twisted in anger. You're acting like I did this on purpose. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. You opened 6 credit cards without telling me, maxed them out, and ignored all the bills. You thought I'd pay them because it's easier for you to let me clean up your mess than to take responsibility. He shouted, I was building credit. I corrected him, you were building a fantasy. He stood up abruptly. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a criminal. I just needed help. I've been stressed. I said, being stressed doesn't create debt. Your choices did. For a moment, he looked like he might cry, but then his anger took over. So, you're just going to watch me drown? That's your plan? I looked at him, at the man I married, and realized that he didn't want a partner, he wanted someone to take the fall for his mistakes. Drowning is when someone falls into water. Tom, you built this pool, filled it, and jumped in, I said softly. The next few days were a nightmare. Tom spent hours on the phone, pacing around the apartment, crying, pleading, and laughing nervously. I heard him promise impossible payments to the credit card companies and tell them he was a good guy. He kept saying, my wife will handle it. But I stayed silent. I went to work, came home, and watched him fall apart. Then, the certified letter arrived. It was from Chase, suing Tom for $14,200 plus interest and legal fees. When he opened the letter, his face went pale. They're suing me. How can they do this? It's just credit cards, he said, his voice thin. I leaned against the doorway and said, that's exactly what they can sue you for. He looked at me with wild eyes. But I don't have $14,000. I knew he didn't. He looked at me, expecting me to say I'd help him. But I said, no. I'm not paying your debt. He was shocked. Maya, I'm your husband. Those are our credit cards, our debt. I replied evenly, they're not my cards. I'm not co-signed on any of them. He snapped, we're married. We're supposed to help each other. I stepped closer. Help is when someone admits they made a mistake and asks for support. What you're asking for is a bailout with no accountability. He then asked, how do you know the balances? I let him sit in the silence for a while. I can count. I've seen every statement that's come through this door for 8 months, I finally said. His face went pale. You've been watching. I corrected him, I've been paying attention. Someone had to. He took a step back, as if the truth was a physical force. He tried to rewrite the story, saying, this is insane. You're acting like I'm abusing you. I looked at him and said quietly, you treated me like an ATM. You dismissed my work and expected me to cover your losses when things went wrong. He accused me of enjoying his suffering, but the truth was, I was grieving. I was grieving the marriage I thought we had, the man I thought he was. A week later, Tom's bank account was frozen. He called me at work, screaming. They froze my account. I can't access my money. I said flatly, what money? Your account has been overdrawn for 2 months. He shouted, that's not the point. How am I supposed to live? I almost laughed. The same way you've been living off my income. He then said, I'm going to call my dad. I knew his father, Robert. He was a loud-mouthed man who loved to give advice but never actually helped. He'd borrowed money from us before and never paid it back. He always had an opinion on what a wife should do, but he never lived up to his own responsibilities as a husband. Tom said, he'll give me money, and then we'll pay off these cards, and you'll owe me an apology. I said, good luck with that, and hung up. That night, Robert called. He didn't waste any time on niceties. Julie, my son tells me you're refusing to help him with his credit card debt. I said, that's correct. He replied, that's not very wife-like. Marriage means supporting each other in hard times. I leaned back against the kitchen counter and said calmly, neither is spending $65,000 without telling your spouse. There was a long silence on the other end. He repeated, 65? Tom had told him it was maybe $10,000 or $15,000 at most. I said, he lied. You're welcome to ask for the statements. He hung up without another word. 2 days later, Tom packed 2 suitcases and said, I'm staying with my mom until you come to your senses. I didn't stop him. I just watched the door close behind him and felt exhausted. A few days later, Helen called. She was a practical and level-headed woman. She said, I'm not taking sides. I just want to understand what's going on. I told her everything: his quitting work, his spending sprees, the credit cards, the unopened statements, the lawsuits, and the frozen account. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, that's not what Tom told us. He said you gambled away your savings and he had to open credit cards to keep you both afloat. I laughed. I've never gambled in my life, but I can prove it. I sent her screenshots of my separate account with $32,000 saved, our joint account showing my consistent deposits and his large withdrawals, and all the credit card statements in Tom's name. An hour later, she called back. He lied to us. I'm so sorry, she said. I told her she didn't have to apologize. She asked, what are you going to do? I said, I'm filing for divorce. She just sighed and said, I understand. The divorce papers were filed the next morning. 3 days later, Tom was served. He called me, hysterical. You're divorcing me over money? Are you serious? I said, I'm divorcing you over lies, disrespect, and financial abuse. The money is just the evidence. He scoffed, financial abuse? You're unbelievable. I listed all his actions: spending $65,000, refusing to work, and lying to his parents. Yes, financial abuse, I said. He hung up. My lawyer says the divorce will be straightforward. The debt is all in Tom's name, and I'm not liable for a cent. Tom is now living with his mother and working in a retail store. According to our mutual friends, he still blames me, saying I trapped him and abandoned him when he needed help. But no one who knows me believes him. A month later, I signed the lease on this smaller apartment. It's less space, less noise, and less pretense. As I stand here in the empty living room, I realize that peace doesn't have to be loud. My savings are still mine, my credit is still perfect, and my future finally feels like my own. I don't feel guilty. I gave Tom time, space, and warnings, but he chose denial. Love isn't about being someone's financial crutch. It's about mutual respect and support. And I'm finally free to build a life that's truly mine.